Hi, this is Danny from Folk of All Trades, and welcome to our Chooks as Garden Helpers video. So this is part of our Simple Living series, thanks to Resilient South, which is the cities of Marion, Mitcham, Holdfast Bay and Onkaparinga. I want to acknowledge we're here on Kaurna land, we're here in Aldinga, and I want to make a link here to native animals, because in another workplace we have bettongs and potoroos, and I've really been learning the roles that animals can play in our landscapes and in our environment as helpers. So the bettongs and potoroos are fantastic soil engineers. They dig the ground, quite a bit like chooks actually, and they help make hollows for seeds to grow and native plants. So it's opening my eyes to how our animals can help us. And in this instance, it's how our chooks can help in our garden ecosystem. We're going to go through three main themes of how they help us, plus some other extra bits and pieces. So we have weeds, how they help with weeds, how they help with bugs, and then how wonderful their poop is too, plus some other bits and pieces. So I'm going to start with weeds. It's the big one for us. It's the one that took us over the line and said, yes, we've got to have chickens. So some of the weeds they help with, and there's lots of weeds really. They particularly are great with these annual grasses. They love eating these. And then an even bigger one for us, there, see some about, I've got the bulbs here and one leaf, are soursopes. So if your landscape and garden is anywhere similar to this one, we have lots of soursopes. That's actually was one of our biggest problems. And not only do they like eating the leaves, they also normally love the bulbs. We'll try in a minute with this chook and see if she'll take them. They also can help with something like cooch. We had cooch in the garden, but they're probably only they're gonna help knock it back a bit, but they probably can't get rid of it. Whereas these they can almost help get rid of if you have enough numbers of the chickens in that space. Sometimes I dig up these, the bulbs. It depends on how hard your soil is, but sometimes I do dig a bit of an area and then they will go through and find the soursop bulbs. And the great thing about that is when they eat the bulb, they're really killing the whole plant. When they eat the leaves, they're slowing it down, but that's what really gets them. So try different weeds. There's some things they don't like. We have quite a few mallows around. They're not interested in those, but a weed is not necessarily always a weed, and mallows can actually be good in medicinal things and in soups. So yeah, they really will be a big help with your weeding. There's a few different ways you can get the weeds to them and get them to make a dent. One is you sort of weed, but then you give them to the chooks and they help destroy it. So soursop bulbs, for example, you wouldn't want to dig it out and just put it somewhere else in your garden, just throw it to the side because it will grow, whereas I will throw them into the chook area because they'll normally eat them. Let's see, she might be a bit distracted by the new hay. Hey, tuk, 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 tuk. You want the soursop bulb? She says, yes, I do. So she loves soursop bulbs, they do love them. And then normally they'll get to the grasses too. I'll leave that there. She'll peck away at that. So in that instance, I am giving the weeds to them. That's something we do in our veggie patch area a bit actually, because the weeds now are under control there. So the few we find, we tend to pass to the chooks. Another way though is to get them into a designated part of your garden, because obviously if chooks sort of go all over the place, they can make a bit of a mess. So one thing we have around here, I think Sam should be able to go round, is we have a chook tractor. So this is a little one because we only ever put 1 or 2 or 3 chooks in it at a time. It's a rabbit hutch from Gumtree, which we then added an extension to. We put shade on it, and we have a little water hanger we hang in there as well. But this is quite small, so we would have this out when we were in the garden for the day, a few hours, and we'd move them along. We'd give them a half an hour somewhere, check on them, scooch them along. We chose this one because it's the width of our rows of our beds. So that was really good. We used it a lot. We've used it a bit less now because the veggie beds are a bit under control. But yeah, little chook tractor is great. You can find ones with wheels and everything. But this one, we put the big handle on, so it wasn't too heavy to lift. And then we also have a way to get the chooks to the other area, which is a chook tunnel round the back. I don't know if she'll come along. She might, tuk, 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 tuk. She's too excited by a straw. Oh no, she's thinking about it anyway. Tuk, 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 tuk. She's coming along our tunnel. Tuk, 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 tuk. There you are. Chicken. Yeah. One of them's happy to demo anyway, come through the tunnel. And the tunnel anyway brings the chicken out to another method for weeds, which is taking them to a bigger weedy area. So this area out here was really quite weedy. We knew we weren't going to have vegetables out there, so we didn't have to think, well, how do we get them to eat the weeds but not the vegetables? So instead, they go out in this area, and we actually sort of, instead of containing the chickens in the little tractor, we contain the plants away from the chickens. That makes sense. We're excluding that bit. So, or we have plants that they're not interested in. Some native plants, some fruit trees, that's a jujube. So yeah, they're not interested in that. Even plants they're not that interested in though, so we want them to weed around them. Like we've got a few little manzano chilies over here. You can see that one's a bit younger, and we do have a tree guard around it. And that's just so that they don't dig the plant out. They love digging and scratching, so they could actually scratch all around the roots of the plant. That's the same with trees as well. So you can see the one next to it, the tree guard has come off, but we still don't want them to dig, particularly where we've watered. They love to dig. So we've put a few bricks around that to protect the roots of the plant. But they should be able to weed this area then, with us just protecting a few plants, and then they weed out there. We had lots of soursops and lots of weeds, and they've gotten on top of them really well. So, and for that area, we found 3 chickens was about the right number. So there are a few methods for getting weeds to chickens and chickens to weeds, but bugs is another one, and I'm actually going to get Sam to rotate right back around here and show you. This is more of our veggie garden area, which we personally keep the chooks out of. And this is where we used to put the chook tractors. So we do find bugs in here. We find like caterpillars, and we find earwigs sometimes, although there's other strategies to help deal with them. The chickens would come in and eat them, but they'd also eat all our vegetables. So instead, when we find caterpillars and whatnot, we just throw them over to the chooks. And that's probably the way we best sort of help with bugs. But what you will notice here by their location, they have this chook run that goes along here, and then sometimes round there as well, is that they've got a sort of a run around the veggie bed. Not in it, but around it. And that really helps them get on top of the bugs out there. So yes, okay, there might be a few earwigs in there, but the fact that they can get all the earwigs around the garden is really going to keep those numbers down. They also do that for termites. So we have termites in this area. We do realise they're part of the natural environment, so we try not to be too scared of them. We do make sensible measures to our house to protect it. But also the chooks, I've turned over some cobbles, and there have been lots of termites under there, and they love them. I reckon that's actually their favourite bug to eat, is termites. So when you turn those over, which is a great source of protein too, any bugs, you know, when you turn it over, they'll eat termites. I've heard of people who, if they don't have a veggie garden by your house, you could actually have chooks in a run around your house, and they would keep the termites pretty well away because, like I said, it's their favourite. So that's a lot about bugs and how they really help us with our bug management. And then the last big one is their poop and their manure. So I'll go back over to the chicken hutch for that. Over in here, this is where the garden gold is kept, the manure. So they have, before we go in, they have a fantastic manure. It's a bit, I shouldn't really have said poop because it's more than that. It's poo and wee together, which is what makes it so wonderful. It has, you know, it's got great sort of goodness in it for soil building, but the P in there means it's high in nitrogen. So that real high in nitrogen manure is, you know, a big fertilizer boost for the garden. That being said, don't just take your chook poop and chuck it out on your garden. It's going to be too strong. It's going to be too much fertilizer for those plants. So you either want to age it, which means resting it somewhere, or we put it in our compost. So our compost bays are back in that area. Compost itself is fantastic because compost itself is brilliant. Sorry, our little outdoor cat's trying to get in the chook area. Compost itself is brilliant soil conditioner, but it itself is not a fertilizer. So adding that chook manure in there kind of gives the compost a bit of a fertilizer boost. So that's why we like to put it through there, and that obviously ages it. So you can see how we collect ours in here. I'll go inside now. Come and join me. We have, this is their sleeping area, and they mostly poop while they sleep, basically, mostly. They will do some out there. So we have a mesh under where they sleep, and then we have this nice little tray that pulls out and it catches most of the manure for us, and so that's easy for us to clean out, and sometimes we collect from there, and that obviously goes in our compost. So chicken manure, also a massive win for chooks and for, you know, having them as garden helpers. One other thing in here, of course, is eggs. Eggs are wonderful in themselves, but they can help your garden too. So once you've had your egg, the outside of this is obviously a lot of calcium in the shell. And you can do lots of things with that. You can feed it back to chooks, you can do all sorts of things. But one of the things we do with some of our shells is there's a process where you basically clean it out, you dry it, and I think you do it in a microwave or an oven, low oven, and then you grind it up into a bit of a powder, and that could be added to your compost or to your veggie gardens as a slower release calcium. So lots of plants, particularly tomatoes and a few other things, really like calcium, so that will eventually reintroduce it to the soil. So even the eggs are good for the garden as well. I'll collect that later. Now we're here I thought I'd talk about this now because I think that's mainly covered the big pros of chickens, which is the weeds, the bugs and the poop. But I thought I'd show you some other things that we love to do with our chickens. This is a little aviary that's sort of feral proof. So this is what keeps foxes out and everything else. This was built so we can put shade and put their water and everything else. But my favourite chook device ever, I hope you can swing round, is this, under the bit of passion fruit, this automatic door opener and closer. So it's we actually bought just the panel up here. I think it's called Coop Secure, not sponsored in any way. But I think it's from Tasmania. That was $100 or so, and then we fitted the little door that comes up and down. Don't worry, it does it very slowly. I thought it might, be a little guillotine, but it's not. It's really slow, and the chooks easily get out the way. And it does it when they're in bed. So they obviously come into this area, and this area is, like I said, it's fox-proof. They come in at night, which is obviously the biggest risk time for them being taken, and then that door just slowly, when it gets dark, goes boo and lowers. Because it's a light sensor one rather than a timer, it means as the days get longer and shorter, it will adjust to that automatically, so you don't have to worry. In here as well, one of our other favourite bits of gear to do with chickens is a treadle feeder. I think they're a step-on feeder that they're called. So the chicken's weight makes that go down, and then they can access their little pellets that are back there. And the good thing about that is, because if we left these out, it would attract mice and rats, and the mice and rats could be a real problem for your vegetables as well. So you definitely don't want to attract mice and rats. So this one is a really good one. It's a nice little feeder for the chooks. I think that's quite a few of our favourite bits of equipment in here. This is, like I said, we actually built this originally maybe for quails, but then this is the main chook house, and like I said, they have their tunnel to their bigger area. And that's how our chooks help us, so I would highly recommend getting chooks in your garden. They are wonderful. Another factor is they're just good for morale. We love seeing them around the garden and their little chicken noises. So thanks for joining us. Please let me know if you have any tips or tricks for chooks in the garden, and yeah, we'll see you soon.